So welcome to my Wordle tutorial. I'm going to be trying to explain everything the best I can. I don't know how many parts are going to be in this series yet, but we'll take it one step at a time. And I'm going to try to keep each video 20 minutes at most. This isn't too complex of a project, so hopefully we can be fine here. But let's go ahead and start creating it. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Wordle clone. And we're going to be using storyboard here and UI kit. So make sure you have that selected. And besides that, everything is looking ready to go. And we'll go ahead and create it here. So for this project, this video is all about setting up the project, setting up our folders, our extensions. And we're not going to be using storyboard here. So we'll move to trash. Not something we need, and we don't need the initial view controller they give us. We'll be creating our own. And so let's go ahead and start creating the folders and files that we need. So we're going to create some new groups, and we're going to have one for our controllers, one for our views, and one for our models. We're going to be using an MVM pattern here. So we're going to type this out: controllers, models, and a new group called views. And I like a new group for utils. And in our utils folder, we're going to have a new file called extensions. And you'll see exactly why we have this in just a second. A lot of you guys might know what I'm doing there, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, so for our controllers, I'm going to explain the design of the Wordle game real quick so you guys are not left in the dark. I'm making a level-based app. So when users log onto the application, they're presented with a screen, and it's going to be the nice home screen. And they're going to have a button saying it's going to be level X. Whatever level they left off on is what the button is going to be displaying. And when they click that button, it'll bring them to the game board, and they can start playing the game. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So we're going to have a new file, and we'll use a Cocoa Touch class, and we'll call this the home view controller. And its inherent is a subclass of UI view controller. And for those who don't know what Cocoa Touch class is, basically it does a lot of the work for you. As you can see, when we create the file, it's already inheriting from UI view controller. It adds the super.viewDidLoad functions, and it saves a lot of time. It's time efficient. And so, for example, if you didn't want to do it with Cocoa Touch and you're really wondering what the difference is here, we could just use a regular Swift file. And we'll have this called like the play screen, maybe the play screen view controller. And this is when they actually go into the game and they're presented with the screen. And so this is the alternative way of doing it. As you can see, you start off with nothing. So you're going to have to import UI kit by yourself, create the public class of play screen view controller. And you're going to inherit from UI view controller. And then you also have to add the viewDidLoad function, and then call super.viewDidLoad. So hopefully that makes that showcases what the difference between these two are enough. Hopefully that's not too complicated. Just the Cocoa Touch classes do a lot of the work for us. I'm just going to go ahead and click iPhone 11 simulator right there real quick. Okay, so for our models, this is going to get a little bit interesting. We might come back to this in just a little bit, but one thing I do want to do is set up our extensions. So it's going to import UI kit. And these extensions are kind of important for me. I do this with every project. They help lay out the UI a lot. So we're going to add an extension on the UI view. And for those who don't know what extension is, it's basically extending the class of UI view. We can edit this, and we're going to add a function that all UI views can call. It's going to be a public func called anchor. And what this is going to do, because we're going to be using auto layout for all of our views, we're going to go ahead and type a little function to make the laying out the views a lot easier. So we'll have a top constraint, which is to be ns layout x axis anchor, or I think this is y axis anchor. We'll have a leading constraint, which is ns layout x or x axis anchor. We'll have a trailing, which is ns layout x axis anchor, and then we'll have a bottom constraint, which is ns layout y axis anchor. All right, and so that's pretty much the header for the function. one thing I like doing it here is not all views will need a constraint every single time. So I like adding default values, making these optional. And then if one's not supplied into the function, we just assign it with nil. Because sometimes you don't want a view to have all 4 constraints, and it's not necessary. The other thing we should also do here is include padding. So we should have padding top, which is a CG float. And by default, it'll be equal to 0. And we'll do this for all sides. So padding to the left is a CG float equal to 0. Padding right is a CG float equal to 0. And padding bottom is a CG float equal to 0. And what these equal signs do is it sets a default value for the function. So if one's not, so if the top parameter is not required, if one's not required, the top gets assigned as nil. And hopefully that makes sense to you. Same thing with the padding. It's a type CG float. If I don't put in a padding top, its default value is going to be 0. Alright, so now we can unwrap all these constraints. So if let top equals top, then we should apply a top constraint. And I guess the first thing we should do is translate auto resizing mask to false. And you do this because Swift by default has this set to true. And it's good for when you lay out stuff such as frames. But you don't want it to be auto resizing because we're going to define our own constraints. So every time you're working with auto layout, and you want this to be set to false. That's really important. Otherwise, nothing would work. All right, and then we can do top anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to whatever the top anchor supplied in was, and we'll do our padding top there. And then we'll do the same thing for our leading equals leading, and our leading anchor, our leading dot constraint is going to be equal to leading with a constant, which is padding left. And you guys should be getting the idea here of what we're really doing. And if you're still confused, if you're like just starting off with auto layout, this will make a lot more sense when we put this into practice, and I'll be talking about it a lot more in depth. But right now I'm just trying to get this all typed out just so we have a nice starting project. I guess I could suppose I could just give you guys this file to copy and paste, right? But I think this is really good for you guys to know how to write these functions, as they're really helpful in your iOS projects. And one thing I did forget to do is once when you give the constraint, you have to make them active. So we'll do .isActive equals true on all of these, and that makes the constraint active. And that should be good there. One other thing that I did forget is auto layout. The iPhone screen by default is a XY plane with the 0, 0 being in the top left corner, right? So when we're giving our trailing and bottom constraints, if we had padding for that, we want it to be away from those sides. So we're going to put negative padding there. Otherwise, the padding would push it further off the screen, either further to the right or further to the bottom, but we want to be going up from the bottom and up from the right. As we do with the top, we go down from the top and right from the left with the leading. And besides this, this function is looking good. I'm going to go have an extension on the UI colors because we're going to be using certain colors within our app. And what we're going to do here is we'll make these static properties, and we'll let beige equal UI color. And I got this color online. I liked it a lot, and I decided to use it in the app, but you guys can take creative liberty and make your own colors if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and type this one out. I think it's 250 red, 0.0. What's the green here? 240 divided by 255.0. Blue is 203 divided by 255.0. And the alpha for this is going to be 1. And that works well. And we'll have another one for yellow. Our yellow color, we can keep all of this. It's going to be 250, 219, and 86 on the blue. declaration is only at valid level, so we accidentally put this inside of our extension on the view, and we should remove this, and that should be good. Okay, I guess we could go ahead and hook up our view controller actually. So what you want to do is you want to go into your scene delegate, and instead of this being the underscore, we'll let this equal to scene, and you want to create your own window. So we're going to let window equals UI window, and we're going to create it with a window scene, and it's going to be the scene from the guard statement right here. And then we want window dot make key and become visible, and then window dot I think view controller dot root view controller equals, and we'll do our home view controller. And I think what that should do is makes our home view controller our initial view controller. So we'll start off with a background color of equals dot red, and we'll see if this is hooked up correctly. If not, we might have to debug just for a second. Oh, we crashed. Okay, so one of the reasons that we were crashing there is because when we remove the main storyboard, we actually have to remove it from the info.plist. So if we go ahead and just remove this or delete it, we should stop crashing. The other thing I did with our scene delegate is instead of creating our own window, I assigned it as a global variable. I don't think that was relevant. That was definitely not why we were crashing, but it is good habit to do that instead. Okay, and then the other thing is we want to delete, if you go to your info plist file, it's under application scene manifest, and you go all the way down to storyboard name, and you delete it there. The other thing is you can just look up storyboard on the left side of your screen, and then delete it from there. And then besides that, we should be good. And you can see we got our red screen hooked up. So a little bit of work to delete the storyboard from the project, which I forgot about. But as you can see, we have a nice starting project with the view.background color equal red. And actually, I think we're going to use our UI color here, dot yellow, as the one for the background actually. And besides that, this is a great place to stop. We got a nice project made up. In the next video, we will be working on the user interface of the home view controller and getting that all set up. We'll do some subclassing with buttons. We'll be working with auto layout constraints. And if you guys are excited for that, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, and because I will be finishing this tutorial and I will be explaining everything in detail, and hopefully you guys are here for the ride. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in part 2.